You are alive, but everything that could save you is gone. Your body is broken, your mind is fracturing. You did everything right and it didn't matter. The disaster came and it took everything. You've been in this situation for days now, maybe weeks. And the worst part isn't what already happened. The worst part is that it's not over. But you are not dead yet. The thing that will actually kill you in the weeks after a catastrophe is not starvation. It's not dehydration. It's not the cold. It's not your injuries. It's the moment your brain decides to stop trying. And most people give up far sooner than they need to. What separates the survivors from the ones who don't make it through those impossible weeks is something most people never expect. And understanding it might change how you think about every disaster you'll ever face. Let's start with what actually happens to your body when everything goes wrong and stays wrong. Your body is built to survive far longer than you think. When food disappears, your metabolism shifts. It starts breaking down stored fat first, then muscle, then organ tissue as a last resort. Your body is cannibalizing itself to keep your brain and heart alive. Without food, a healthy adult can survive roughly 2 to 3 weeks depending on starting weight, temperature, and activity level. Some people have lasted longer, much longer. When water disappears, the timeline shortens. Most people can survive 3 to 5 days without drinking anything, though that number drops fast in heat or if you're exerting yourself. But your body has other tricks. It reduces urine output. It pulls water back from your intestines. It slows everything down. It is trying with every system it has to buy you one more day, one more hour. Temperature is different. Hypothermia can kill in hours if you're wet and exposed. Your body fights it by shivering, by pulling blood away from your limbs to protect your core, by doing everything it can to keep your brain above 30 degrees Celsius. But it can't fight forever. At some point, the shivering stops. That's when you're in real trouble. But here's the thing about the human body in a sustained crisis. It is shockingly, almost unbelievably resilient. It evolved over millions of years to survive famines, floods, droughts, and catastrophes. The humans who didn't have bodies capable of enduring weeks of deprivation didn't pass on their genes. You are the descendant of survivors. Every cell in your body carries that legacy. The problem is not your body. The problem is your mind. When you're starving, when you're cold, when you're exhausted and alone and nobody is coming, your brain starts producing something worse than pain. It produces certainty. Absolute, crushing certainty that this is permanent, that you will not be rescued, that the worst has already happened and nothing will ever get better. This psychological collapse typically arrives in waves. A few hours of determination followed by a few hours of total despair. Back and forth, over and over, day after day. And it's in those low moments, when the certainty of doom feels like the truest thing in the world, that people make the fatal decision to stop. Now let me show you what it looks like when someone doesn't stop. In 1982, a sailor named Stephen Callahan was crossing the Atlantic alone when something struck his boat at night. He never saw what it was, most likely a whale. The hull cracked, the boat flooded, and within minutes he found himself in a 6-foot inflatable life raft in the middle of the open ocean. He had a few flares, some fish hooks, almost no food or no water. He survived for 76 days. 76 days on a raft barely longer than his body, drifting across the Atlantic Ocean. Callahan kept a journal the entire time, and what he wrote in that journal tells you more about survival than any textbook ever could. He documented the waves of despair. He described how they felt permanent every single time. He wrote about the moments when his brain told him with absolute conviction that nobody was searching for him and nobody ever would. He wrote about how he had to learn, day by day, to feel the despair without obeying it, to acknowledge the darkness without letting it make his decisions for him. He rationed his emergency food with mathematical precision. He built a solar still from the cover of his raft to produce small amounts of freshwater from seawater. He fashioned a spear gun from his emergency knife and a piece of tubing, and he used it to catch fish that gathered under the shadow of his raft. He ate flying fish raw. He collected rainwater whenever the sky offered it. Every single day he had to solve problems, and every single day his brain tried to convince him that solving problems was pointless. By the time his raft washed ashore in Guadeloupe, Callahan had lost roughly 45 pounds. His body was covered in salt sores. He was severely dehydrated, but he was alive. He was alive because he never stopped thinking. He never stopped problem solving. He never let one bad day become the last day. In 2012, A fisherman from El Salvador named Jose Salvador Alvarenga set out from the coast of Mexico for a day of shark fishing. His boat was 25 feet long. He brought a young crewmate named Ezequiel Cordoba. They expected to be back by nightfall. They never came back. A storm hit, their engine died, their radio died, their anchor line snapped, and within hours they were drifting out into the Pacific Ocean with almost nothing. What was supposed to be a day trip became the longest open ocean survival in recorded history. Alvarenga drifted for 438 days, over 6,000 miles across the Pacific. Cordoba didn't make it. He gave up in the first month. He stopped eating. He stopped drinking. He told Alvarenga that when he died, Alvarenga should eat his body to survive. Alvarenga promised he would. When Cordoba died, Alvarenga wrapped his body and kept it in the boat for 6 days. Then he pushed it overboard. He could not bring himself to do what he had promised, but he kept going. For over a year, Alvarenga caught turtles, birds, and fish with his bare hands. He drank rainwater and collected it in containers whenever the sky offered it. When he saw ships or planes in the distance, he stripped naked and waved his clothing in the air, hoping someone would see him. Nobody did, not for over a year. He spoke to himself. He screamed at the ocean. He prayed. He bargained with God, and through all of it, he never stopped eating. He never stopped collecting water. He never stopped scanning the horizon. When he finally washed ashore in the Marshall Islands in January 2014, he was thin, dehydrated, and covered in sores. But he was alive. 438 days because he refused to stop. Because no matter what the ocean took from him, it could not make him sit down and accept that this was the end. And then there is the story that proves the line between surviving and dying is drawn by choices so brutal that most of us cannot even imagine making them. On October 13, 1972, a plane carrying 45 people, most of them members of a Uruguayan rugby team, crashed into a mountain in the Andes at over 11,000 feet. The impact killed several passengers immediately. Others died within hours from their injuries. The survivors found themselves stranded above the snow line in freezing temperatures with almost no food, a few chocolate bars, a few bottles of wine, nothing else. Over the following weeks, people died from cold, from injuries, from starvation. On October 29th, an avalanche buried the fuselage of the plane, killing 8 more survivors. Those who remained were entombed in snow and darkness, pressed against the bodies of their dead friends running out of air. And then the survivors heard something on a small transistor radio. The search had been called off. Their families had been told they were dead. Nobody was coming. In that moment, most people would stop. And that is the exact moment when the survivors made a decision that kept them alive. They chose to eat the bodies of their dead companions. It was not a decision made in abstract. These were their friends, their teammates, people they loved. But their bodies needed protein, and without it, every single one of them would die. Most of the survivors made that choice. A few could not. Those who refused did not survive. When Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa learned that the search had been abandoned, they decided to climb out. They spent 10 days crossing frozen peaks and barren valleys with almost no food, no climbing gear, and no guarantee that they would find anything on the other side. On the 10th day, they spotted a Chilean herder on horseback across a river. They screamed. He heard them. He alerted the authorities. Rescue helicopters reached the remaining survivors the next day. 16 people walked out of the Andes alive. The decision that saved them was not heroic. It was not beautiful. It was the hardest thing any of them had ever done or would ever do. But it was the decision that kept them thinking, kept them moving, kept them refusing to die. Here is the counterintuitive truth about surviving weeks when everything has gone wrong. It is not about being strong. It is not about being lucky. It is not about having supplies or training or connections. It is about refusing to let one terrible moment become the final moment. Survival research consistently shows that giving up is not a passive event. It is an active decision. Your body can endure far more than your mind believes. But when you accept hopelessness as permanent, when you stop looking for solutions, when you sit down and decide that this is the end, your body follows your mind into the dark. Stephen Callahan could have stopped on day 10. His body would have kept going, but his mind would have ended it. Jose Salvador Alvarenga could have stopped after his companion died. Instead, he kept catching turtles and scanning the horizon for over a year. The Andes survivors could have accepted the radio broadcast and waited to die. Instead, they chose the unimaginable, and then they chose to climb. None of them knew they would be rescued. None of them knew they would survive. They simply refused to stop. And here is why this matters to you right now in your ordinary life. You will probably never face a shipwreck, an ocean crossing, or a plane crash in the mountains. But you will face weeks when everything goes wrong. A job loss that turns into months of financial collapse. A health diagnosis that rewires your entire future. A relationship that dissolves and takes your sense of identity with it. Grief that hits you so hard you cannot get out of bed. These disasters do not come with sirens. They do not announce themselves. They happen quietly in the middle of ordinary days, in the middle of ordinary lives. And in the weeks that follow, when the worst feels permanent and the future feels impossible, the exact same mechanism activates in your brain. It produces waves of despair. It tells you this is the new reality. It tells you that you cannot recover. It tells you the damage is already done. But just like on a life raft, just like on a frozen mountain, your brain is wrong. It is overestimating how long the pain will last. It is underestimating what you can survive. The people who make it through the worst weeks of their lives are not the ones who feel no despair. They are the ones who feel it and keep going anyway. They solve the next small problem. They eat the next available meal. They take the next step forward. They refuse to let one catastrophic moment become the last moment. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, but you are not dead yet. And as long as that is true, the worst has not happened. The worst only happens when you decide to stop.